This week, we're going to be talking with the one, the only Mr. Chris Story, obviously a current practitioner, but also podcast co-host and board member extraordinaire.
The training industry drove whatever it said you needed, and the customer got whatever the training industry drove.
Welcome to the Circuit Magazine, the #1 source of information on protection matters, the industry-leading magazine for all security professionals who want to stay ahead of the game.
Is threat intelligence the only language that physical and cyber security can use to effectively communicate? The how, the why. Why are we looking forward to this topic, Sean? Why is it important? And, can you tell us a little bit about Chris?
I think it's an important topic, reason being the physical and cyber security experts working together and how they work together to solve different problems. And Chris, it's always good to hear from him. As you know, he is the co-host of Conversation in Close Protection, and he did help bring together the podcast of podcasts.
Indeed, and that was a great one, and hopefully we'll get Elijah and Byron and others on to the next podcast of podcasts. What's interesting about this topic and at this time is many of you will remember Chris very kindly moderated a couple of panels at an in-person convergence event in Phoenix that I held a couple of weeks ago. In person, yes, it was. And we had a great who's who of EP. Many of you will, of course, know all the names. But what we actually did with the panel with Chris was to look at whether or not cyber and physical would have any other reason to communicate other than to exchange threat intel. And if that was the case, it was the extension of the who you're going to call strategy. Much as you don't need to be a TSCM specialist, but you need to know who to call. But maybe more importantly, why? Is this an emerging field? Has this always been the case? Is this the only reason cyber and physical should speak together, Sean?
No, as I mentioned earlier, it's definitely not the only reason. I think we should all problem solve together. But as you said, it is about its relationships. And me as a security professional, I have a black book of different people in different fields, whether that be providing K9 security, cyber security, physical security, executive protection. You need to know who to go to, when to call them, and you should touch base with all these people throughout your time in the industry just to keep the relationships going and to help problem solve in all of the different areas we have.
Indeed, and I suppose we couldn't even find out what problems we want to solve unless we speak the same language. So anyway, I'm not prejudging it, but I do like the idea of threat intel as a common language. Obviously, we're very grateful to Chris for his inspirational co-hosting of Conversations in Close Protection, which we both listen to. That's co-hosted with Chuck Randolph. But I find that this is going to be a rather interesting interview, not least because, over the last 5 years, everyone has been talking convergence, but we haven't yet seen some fruit. We're not saying that one person has to be a hacker and an EP specialist, a KNR specialist, but something has to come out of it. So I'm really looking forward to this. Let's hear from the one, the only Mr. Chris Story, co-host, current practitioner, and of course, IPSB board member.
And now, let's meet one of the contributors to the Circuit Magazine.
Converged security and threat intelligence. Is threat intelligence the only glue or language that executive protection can truly use to basically bond with all other areas of security? We're here, Elijah Shaw and myself, we're here with Chris Story, the one, the only, who very kindly has just gotten back from moderating a panel discussion at our annual Physical Cyber Convergence Forum in Phoenix. In person. I really want to stress that. Thank you so much, Chris. It's a pleasure to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for the invite for this, and also thank you for the invite for the Physical and Cyber Convergence Forum in Arizona. It was cool.
Well, I'm glad we got it off the ground, and so many great friends, people have already had mentions in previous podcasts, but so many great friends from the industry were there, which is really nice considering we haven't been able to physically meet. This panel, I know you moderated a couple of panels, but this one was quite fascinating. Converged security and threat intel, and whether or not threat intel is some lubricant, some language, some area of modernization for EP. What do you think is not quite right with the way EP is handling threat intel at the moment?
Oh, that's a good question. So from my perspective, it would be essentially almost ignoring it, right? Protectors as a whole tend to go, hey, I'm here, so you're protected, right? And we don't look beyond that 15 feet area of responsibility at times. We don't look at it geographically at times. And I'm saying collectively, right? We've got a lot of professionals out there that do it, but I say the industry as a whole say, hey, look, I'm kind of famous for saying, I'm John Wick. You don't need to know anything else. I'm your last line of defense, right? And so I think, from a threat intelligence perspective, that's all cool in the gang. But at the end of the day, if you go into a dark room, wouldn't you rather know what can bump you in the shins and where that's located and where the light switch is located rather than having to find your way through it time after time again just because it's you? Really, we need to know what's going on around us and then be able to create plans around that and respond to it, not just the human physical threat that's standing in front of us or that's known making the threats to the principal. We got to look further, we got to look deeper so we can change the trajectory of those threats before they hit our principal. And I think that's the future of executive protection. And
what about you? Where does your passion for threat intel and corporate security modernization really come from?
Well, it's no secret that my background was in military intelligence at first. And I think that luckily that gave me some big picture views. And so that's where my passion lies, is how do we inform the protector faster so that they avoid the need for the response? Not to say the response should go away. We still have to train for that, but it's really more about avoidance rather than facing the threat. That's the fantasy that we all have. But in reality, we should be, practiced and very, very well trained, highly trained and capable of risk avoidance. So that's where my passion really lies, is protective intelligence, understanding the threat, and then relaying that to the team so that they're aware and they know what's happening.
So let me ask real quick. One of the things I think that's been really impressive during our interactions and is that you're able to communicate that well. Whereas I see some of the deficiency in teams is because that's not sexy, that gets overlooked. Mm-hmm. So, is it a matter of making that sexy? Is it a matter of learning the proper language in order to convey that, one, to the team and then also to the protectee so that they get it? How do we get everybody to buy in on this?
Well, so that's the $1 million question, right? Because all the training pieces that we see out there are sexy. The rest of it really isn't, right? And all of it is really designed to make us look good, mm-hmm. right? So I'm the protector. I'm standing next to the boss. I'm doing all the things. I think it's really educating everybody on why you're standing next to the boss. Before, if you think way back when we didn't have gray hair, or I didn't have gray hair, just being a millionaire would be like, hey, you should have protection. Right now now you could, throw a rock down the street and hit 4 millionaires without security. Really, it's what does it take to put the protector next to the person, right? Not because it's a contract, not because it's in their rider, not because of these other things, but what is the essential risk element that's there that we need to be aware of, and that should all be fed to us all the time. We should always be looking for those threat vectors so that we, sure, it's great for me to go all ninja, but if I get cut off at the knees, I'm out of work, right? I don't get to stand next to the person anymore. So I think it's understanding and maturing the profession to say, hey, look, it's all great that you're there, and it's awesome that we're standing next to whoever we're standing next to, but understand what the foundation was that put you there, and look at that risk and threat intelligence to understand what can hurt you beyond that 15 yards that you're responsible for, or that you find yourself responsible for. And it makes your job abundantly easier. And I think likely we'd find a lot of wins, beyond that 15 yards.
And beyond it lies spooky land, such as cyber. And, you'll love that I call it spooky because, in fact, many things that preserve of nation states now easy peasy for people to pick up. So I'd be interested, and of course, please elaborate for those who were not there at the Convergence Forum. converged security? Is threat intel the only language that cyber and physical are effectively going to be able to speak to each other?
So great question. And Jason Vayak had kind of talked about convergence being a state of mind, right? It isn't a thing, a person, a place, a group, whatever. It's a state of mind, and it's going like, hey, do I need to face the threat alone, or are there other threat vectors out there, like the scary cyber piece that we're just going to turn a blind eye to? And so I think that really threat intelligence does become the place where we're able to have a common language, because until I can speak cyber language and understand threats and threat vectors and what those might be, I don't have to understand them at a high level. I just have to understand what can hurt us and what can help us, and what tools that are helping me, what brings risk to the organization. At that basic level, I need to understand that. Excuse me. Beyond that, the threat intelligence piece is, I think, where we can start communicating. Hey, what can hurt me here? What can hurt me as I'm bringing my phone into this environment? What can bring me as the boss's phone, or collectively our group's phones or our group's laptops? If I'm going to do a presentation, should we bring our own? Should I Bluetooth it? Should I Wi-Fi it? Should I use a USB? Right? I think you guys did an article on the scary STD of cyber world, the USB. So all of these things we have to understand. There are multiple threat vectors, and as an executive protection specialist or professional, I'm really, and I think this goes back to your question, Isaiah, I'm responsible for all of your security, not just your personal security. Mm-hmm. And once we start taking that ownership, and we understand that there are cyber risks, there are health risks, there are environmental risks that we're responsible for as an industry. And I think we're starting to get that, right? We're growing up with that. The new crop of protectors, it's those of us who are kind of grew up without iPhones and grew up without all this technology. That's the gap. I think we really need to continue to embrace that. And that's where the threat intelligence piece kind of connects us all, is that we have to understand, what risks the technology brings that the cyber can attack, as we're responsible for that person that we're with.
Sure. Well, I think I'll talk to the guys and say that I hated that I missed the conference there, because I'm sure you guys touched on it. But I think you're optimistic when you say that, the younger generation, not to make us sound too old, get that. And the reason is that I fear, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, I fear that because they grew up with the tech, maybe they don't fear it as much. Meaning, mm-hmm. Those privacy concerns aren't concerns for them, because that's all they've known. If I'm plugged into the Internet of Everything all of the time, what's the issue? So, and particularly like if we're talking about a team, and you're building a team, and you're trying to get the team on the same page, and trying to get the protectee on the same page. How do you mesh those mindsets? How do you take kind of maybe these old school, sometimes maybe irrational fears, and combine them with that nonchalance of the new school, which is like, hey, bro, this is what nanotech is where we're at right now. So AI is where we're at right now. So just deal with it.
Right. So great question. And I think it is a little optimistic, but I kind of defer it to being instilling professionalism, right? We're both instructors. We both focus on security, executive security per se. And that's the piece that, as we understand what those threat vectors are, even though it's all open all the time, I share, we still represent somebody else's privacy concerns. We will still represent somebody else's security concerns. So while I may be on Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, blah, 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 all the time, I have to change my own behaviors as a security person with my whatever organization I'm supporting, right? And that's just normal. I think that's a natural progression to, hey, here's one set of rules for work, and here's one set of rules for me as a person in the profession that I choose, right? And if I don't work within those timelines, or those constraints, then maybe this isn't the profession for me. I think that you bring up a great point in terms of, I might embrace tech so much that I don't focus on the hard skills either. Right. And that's the thing, is that, hey, what technology work for it? I can't fight my way to a wet paper bag. I can't communicate. I can't deconflict, but I have this filter that I carry with me all the time, and I just put it up, and that's how I communicate with people. So I think, there's a learning curve on both sides, and it'll never be perfect. But I think as we mature ourselves and as an industry, we'll learn to embrace technology, and we'll find some sort of balance between tech, cyber, hard skills, soft skills, less feeling tastes great, all that stuff that makes well-rounded protectors for the environment that we find ourselves in. And not everybody's going to be in the tech space. I think we use the, Silicon Valley area as the end all be all of what's happening in the world. And we all know that there are plenty of organizations that use protectors, residential details, mobile details, et cetera, that just aren't at the pinnacle of tech. So there's a lot of lagging operations that are really not lagging. They're really probably more center of the curve, the bell curve from the early adopters, which we'd see as Silicon Valley. So I think there's time, right? It's just we look at that as like, oh my God, it's all happening now, but it's really a small microcosm of whatever we're doing. The piece is that everybody's a tech user, right? That's the hard part, is that we just have to worry about what's in our environment now, so that it prepares us for what's coming down the pike in the future as far as the Internet of Things.
Sure, I get it. Wow.
And Chris, just to build on that, and also, I don't know if the audience has seen or heard our recent interview with Dr. Samantha Newbury, who talks about academic intelligence and its applicability in the real world. You operate very much in the real world, right? Mm-hmm. So let me ask a question that I think we brought up on the panel in the Convergence Forum, which is, well, all this intelligence that may or may not be the lubricant, the language, the glue to help LP, cyber, EP, corporate all talk together. Where should it live? And what should house it, right? Everyone has a phone, but where should all this intel live? Does everyone need a SOC, or are you your own SOC? Where is all this threat intel?
So I think the piece about the threat intel is that it opens up the funnel for a lot of, not threat vectors, but information vectors for us to dump all this in one bucket, right? And you're saying, well, where does it house, or how do we house it? And I think phones are one option. Again, it depends on your business model, how much information you have, how much information intelligence is being processed, and where does it go? Oftentimes, we've got organizations that get all of this information in and don't know where to put it, so it's useless, right? So the idea is to right-size that information flow with, which is probably the hardest part of all of where to put the information, is how do I right-size the information flow in and information flow out? What is it? What is intelligence, and what's just information, and what's usable later, right? So thought processes are using essentially things like Slack or other tools that allow you to get the right information at the right time. AI is helpful, but we still need some level of analysis with a human interaction. So someone to look at all of the feeds that you're on and go, okay, that can hurt us, and then push it to you. Mm-hmm. Other than that, because what we find is too much information just becomes white noise, and then we miss the needle in the haystack because we're getting showered by hay. So I think that the GSOC or version of it, and I'm hesitant to say GSOC now, because I think GSOC has really become a kind of like a buzzword, if you will. Most organizations have a GSOC, a command center, whatever, and it just manages their CCTV, their access control, and a couple other small functions. Really what we're looking for is risk intelligence. Excuse me. Again, what can hurt us, what can help us. So the GSOC becomes a function of that risk intelligence center, but really we're looking for intelligence. What can hurt us, what can help us. So I think getting that information in, it could be remote, it could be on site, depending on your business model and your business. But really the most important piece is, yes, it gets housed in, but it's got to be able to be pushed out in a manner that it's digestible, actionable, and not the news. If you're sending me the news, it's too late. So those are the pieces that I think. The where is, it could be remote, it could be on site, it could be somebody in your vehicle, in a follow vehicle that's got access and a laptop and can push information to you, while you're inside the venue.
So does that mean everyone needs to go through basic threat intel training as if they were in the military?
Well, from my perspective, yes. Right. I mean, we go through the formations and operations and advances and et cetera. I think, threat intelligence is just the next step.
Well, and I guess that's the piece that, I look for the solution for, which is how do we push particularly the new protectors that are entering the industry into that realm? You see the schools that are out there, and mm-hmm. the schools, have to market the sizzle. It's just, part of marketing and promotion. But yep. How do you make this attractive enough that someone says, okay, I'm going to invest my time and I'm going to invest, the monies into an area like this when it wasn't front and center for me in the first place?
So you said another challenging question for the industry. I think part of that is identifying people who are interested. First of all, changing the requirements at the user end, right? That's what drives training, right? What we found so long forever is that the training industry drove, whatever it said you needed, and the customer got whatever the training industry drove. So operations should drive training, not training drive operations, and there's this big operational gap. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is identifying folks that, first off, a lot of what we do in the training industry is selling the sexy, but packing a lot of the required items in between it. Because if you really wanted to train somebody in what the daily life of an executive protector was, you wouldn't give them an exercise where your arrival departures, attack on principle. You'd put them in front of a door and say, only one person comes through. Here's what they look like, and here's their badge. Nobody else comes through. I'll see you in 8 hours, right? Mm-hmm. Well, nobody's going to pay for that.
Sure.
So you, like with most training courses or schools, you have the sexy, but you put in the required training, the things that you need to know as you go, and you understand you're connecting them with employers that are requiring those skills in the field. And I think we've got to work with the employers and those employers that have those requirements. I think sooner or later it'll become a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody asks you if you went to an advanced class, if you went to name your school. They just assume that you've done it, right? And so I think educating employers, educating other folks on what it is that you do and why, I think that becomes important as well. And then it'll become like it's always been, right? Here's what you need to know. The next piece is that we often see these kids that have a lot of aptitude for it. There's probably about 10% in the class. There's, in classes that I've seen, there's, oh, hey, bro, I'm just a body guy, bro. That's all I'm going to do. Okay. But the ones who are like, hey, what are you doing on your laptop? Oh, I just found out that we just got hacked. Okay, come here, you. Right. Those are the ones that you say, hey, look, we're going to find a spot for you because I think you can add a lot of value.
Sure.
It's almost as if you've got to imagine yourself in a family office. And I mentioned that because when we had Simeon Rosette on and Kate Bright, we were always talking about the fact that you sign up for one job, but you've got to have the attitude to do anything. So right. You could be the iPhone, connoisseur, and you have to fly around the world hunting new iPhones, or you have to get some actual threat intel that's targeting your boss, right? It's really that big a spectrum, and maybe it's an attitude, isn't it? And a converged attitude, as in fact you said that Jason said at the event.
Yeah, so I think it's a hunter mentality, really. But I want to be able to hunt something as far away as possible so I can intercept it. I don't want it to get to my front gate to make sure that what if I fail? What if I slip and fall or I'm in the bathroom when they arrive at the gate, right? So it becomes that hunter mentality. What can I find out there that's looking after us and hurting us? We've got to be inquisitive. We've got to understand we can't just be there. Hey, I'm just here to respond, bro. That's all I do. And I think that's the evolution of the protector. It's, more well-rounded, more understanding. And I think like in the family office, like you said, you have a myriad of jobs to do. And we want to be the person that's like interfacing with the principals or doing all the things. We don't want to, I got to take the kids to the movies, right? I'm a name your ninja self. That's not what I do, but that is what you do. So understand that, and then look for what can hurt us. Be inquisitive beyond that 15, 25 feet that you think you're responsible for.
One of the things that you raised in the panel, and I love bringing back the panel because we're sort of helping everyone who was not there bring it to life, right? You asked, what does threat intel not include? As in, what is the limits? Because surely, obviously, everyone has that funny story about the wonderful sparkly box that people sell a subscription to, and they go to Egypt, and the wonderful piece of news is that there are some pyramids. That's obviously not threat intel, and it's obviously not the best sparkly box. But in your opinion, as per this panel question, what does it not include?
Essentially, it doesn't include information that's untimely, right? So if you're, like I said, if it's the news, that's not helpful. It's really what comes down to is the things and I really hate to use this term, but there's really isn't an option at this point, which is actionable, right? What can affect me? Because we have different levels of intelligence, right? Different levels of threat intelligence. We've got tactical intelligence, we've got operational intelligence, strategic intelligence. One is what's good, strategic intelligence is what can affect us at a large scale, operationally, advanced persistent threats. What can I do? It's long term. Depending on how you scale it, we'll use operations in the center and not boots on the ground, but from an operational perspective, what can impact our operations? I.e., what are we doing tomorrow? What are we doing the next day? Then the tactical piece is what are we doing right now? So if you tell me something that is going to happen tomorrow, that might not be relevant for what I'm dealing with right now. So that's the piece that we've got to understand and figure out what's relevant to the team on the ground that's going to be used right now versus what it just becomes information that gets, again, it's just, it's a filter. I was on a detail one time where they used a WhatsApp channel for everything. And I've been on a detail one time where they've used radios for everything at an event with 300 people. People are asking to go to the bathroom. People are asking for this, and people are asking for meal breaks, and it's just white noise because you're never going to hear the call for help. So you just turn it off. I think I got on the detail was on the WhatsApp. It was the thing just never, you had to plug your phone in because it just never stopped going off. And nothing was relevant, right? So it's what is relevant to you on the ground. I think so you asked what's not threat intelligence. It's anything that's not relevant to me in my operation as it applies to me on the ground. That might be different from what Elijah's working with if he's in a GSOC or if he's doing advances. That's completely different set of threat intel.
Well, that is a wonderful tour de force around threat intel, converged security, for EP, and of course, that wonderful synopsis of last week's event in Phoenix, in-person event. I mentioned again, in person, because, it's a rare occurrence. I want to ask what's new for you. And you might have noticed in the beginning, I introduced you as the one, the only Chris Story, because you have many hats. So I didn't want to either miss some out or put too many on. Of course, you also have your conversations in close protection hat. I just would be interested in sharing with the audience what's new for you and conversations in CB.
Well, you asked the first question, I think, was what is your passion, right? So if you hear me babble about threat intelligence, protective intelligence, there it is, right? So yes, I do wear many hats, transitioning to a lot of protective intelligence rather than executive protection, focusing a lot on risk now with a bunch of groups, Triumph Protection Group, Orbital Risk, anomaly management, enablement, all the name drops, but working to assist all those organizations in maturing their operations and their training and all the things.
Nice.
And you'll work with the wonderful Chuck Randolph?
Oh yeah, Chuck and I, he's like he is literally a redheaded stepchild. So yes, as a partner, we actually recorded last night, and we did a review of the Arizona event as well. So that'll be coming out. Actually, that comes out today.
Nice.
Hey,
yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you ever so much for joining us. Thank you ever so much for moderating such excellent panels in person. I have some select segments that we'll hopefully have on the BBA Connect app and the NABA Protector app, but I'll explain a bit more further down the line. Chris, from Elijah and myself, it's been a pleasure having you on the Circuit Magazine podcast.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Appreciate both you guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only Mr. Chris Story. It's been a pleasure to have you on. And of course, love the work that you do with Chuck Randolph on Conversations in Close Protection. I listen to it every week. I know Sean does. And, what an interesting topic. We've talked convergence for many years, but what's the outcome? Is the outcome that physical specialists just don't need to be afraid of cyber? They just need to see it as another spoke, the who you're going to call strategy. But is threat intel the only language that, we can use to speak between the two? Or is it the only purpose that the two would have to actually speak? It raises a bigger question, do enough people understand what threat intel is, Sean?
Well, I'm not sure they do. I mean, we get information from so many different sources now, from news outlets, from people's Twitter feeds, Facebook feeds, all sorts of manners of areas. And some people will see this as actual intelligence, where it's not. It's information that you're gaining from what people have posted. It doesn't actually become intelligence until it's been analysed and made into actionable intelligence, and the sources have been verified of where that comes from.
It's true, isn't it? Because there's so much noise, there's obesity of information out there, but that, sifting the SIG-int, right? The old SIG-int, that is a sifting process in itself. And, it was great to have Dr. Samantha Newbury on the other week talking about academically what intelligence should look like. But I think if everybody understands what they're using it for and why, then they can work backwards. They can say, well, it's come from cyber. Well, good. Now we know dark web threat intel, someone's chasing my principal online. Or it may be TSCM. Well, now we know someone's planted a bug because whatever. Or maybe it is a medical requirement. It doesn't really matter, but it doesn't have to be you. You are not the hacker. You are literally the person that convenes the threat intel for your purposes. So I like that as an explanation of how convergence is going. Obviously, love every episode that Chris puts out. He's got many hats. Of course, another hat is one of the directors of the IPSB that happens every December in Vegas, live and in person this year. So for those who are permitted into the States and have no trouble with visas, I'm very much looking forward to that. And we've got, tons and tons of follow-up to do with the community. Talking about the community, as always, great traction on the BBA Connect app and the NABA app. I noticed as well a lot going on Clubhouse. I don't know if that's come your way, Sean. What have you been noticing out in the community and with the magazine this week?
It's been great. We're getting a lot of traction on all of the apps. Lots of subjects covered. Clubhouse is not something I've managed to delve into myself as of yet. I've seen lots of people talking about it, and there seems to be some great content there, especially US side, which I would love to get involved in. And I think it's the time differences at the moment.
It is, isn't it? Because sometimes they say, hey, would you like to join us Sunday at what would be 2 a.m. in our morning? Which I get it, if you're from Australia, if you're listening, Suzanne, or maybe Gideon, if you're in Australia, or Joe, of course, Joe, we had Joe on in Australia. You're used to people putting things at inconvenient times, so we shouldn't complain. But it's certainly interesting to keep an eye on it because that feeds through into the app, and many people then start to talk about what they're doing, whether that's near-term goals or in the future. So I really think that's something to watch. So Sean, what's next for the magazine? Because we say every week we're looking for some interesting contributors. Doesn't have to be from the normal sources, does it? We had a butler, Suzanne, very, very kindly do a piece on etiquette recently for the latest edition. What sort of people could we include?
It doesn't have to be security related. It could be in any article that can provide benefit to those working in the industry. Like you said, we had the Butler article, which went down really well. We could have articles from a whole range of sources on a whole range of different subjects. One thing that would be interesting at the moment is the drawdown in Afghanistan, how that's affected people. If it's affected any of our members or readers, it'd be great to get some first-hand accounts of what it's actually been like there as the different nations have closed down their various projects and evacuated their citizens out of country.
Absolutely. And of course, no rush if you're indeed, now preoccupied, but that, I think that would make for an interesting article. So if you know somebody as well who has a great testimony to tell, absolutely. That's something very current and, on the minds of many. And in a way, that is a form of threat intel, or is it? It's just data until you turn it into threat intel, actionable threat intel. So I don't know, I'm playing on today's segment with Chris. Please do check out Conversations in Close Protection as well, which is a fantastic resource. Really enjoy it. From Sean and myself, it's been a pleasure to talk to the one, the only Mr. Chris Story. Many hats he has, but co-host, director, practitioner, you name it. I think we're going to see so much more from Chris in the near future. From Sean and myself, this has been another fantastic edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast.
You have been listening to the Circuit Magazine podcast. Be sure to subscribe and be sure to not miss an episode.